Hello and welcome to Chainmail Stories Worth Sharing. This is the very first episode of Chainmail, and I'm so excited that it's with my longtime friend and mentor, photojournalist Lior Sperandeo. Starting out as a news cameraman and now freelancing, Lior has covered a wide range of stories across the world, often with isolated and hidden communities. From the droughts of Africa to the earthquakes in Mexico, Lior has seen it all. And given the current political and social climate, I wanted to know what creative responsibility exists in times of crisis. So maybe the best way to start would be give everyone your full name and what you do.
All right, are we on?
Yes, we are on. We're recording.
Woo!
For the rare time that you're not behind the camera, you're in front of it, and you'll be talking to people. So this will be fun.
Great. Well, you know that I'm here just because it's you, right?
Yeah, I know that. I know that.
I refused so many Skypes and Facebook Lives and Instagram Live and all of that during this COVID, but here I am falling in it.
Thank you.
Um,
Thank you.
So my name is Lior Sperandeo. I'm an Israeli visual artist. I like to say that I'm on the intersection of photojournalism and fine art, but honestly, I don't know where I am. I'm just advocating with the camera, I guess. That's I'm protesting with the camera. I know some people protest with a sign, with a shout. I protest with the camera. That's what I have on my hand, and that's what I like to do.
I love that. I love that. So, like, I think it's cool for people to know how we met. Actually, we met through Instagram. I think
Yeah.
I shared a photo of yours, and then that's how we connected. And then we did a bit of work together, and then we hung out in Paris, which sounds super extra, but I was there for a wedding, and we just happened. You were in Paris, and we hung out for a bit, and now we're doing a bunch of work together. But I think I wanted to talk to you today because I think the climate of the world that we're living in lends a lot to the work that you've done, especially with the COVID-19 crisis and also the racial crisis happening in America and around the world. Where we're going to have some protests here in Melbourne over the weekend too, I think. This idea of documenting as a creative in a crisis. And I know that you've done a lot of that. You were in Mexico during an earthquake. You were in Mozambique after Cyclone Ida. And then also you've done a lot of work across Africa, like South Sudan and stuff like that. And I think that you have a lot of really important insight into what it's like to work in times like that and the responsibility you have as a creative as a result of that. And you talk about advocacy and all that kind of thing. But I guess I like to start with maybe give some people into the crises that you have documented, maybe one or two examples.
Yeah. Well, I started my career as a news cameraman, and through that, I got exposed to, first of all, news in Israel that can get pretty hectic and violent sometimes. But also outside of Israel, I think my first natural disaster that I went to cover was Nepal. Gorka earthquake that killed 9,000 people. It was awful. And I arrived there just 24 hours after. It was a big shock. I was very young. And then, like you said, Mexico City, I was there during the earthquake, just shooting something completely different. So that was a different experience because I lived in that crisis and I didn't just come to document it. That was quite an experience. Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico and Dominica, Cyclone Idai, like you said, in Mozambique, and a lot of places that we call it a crisis, but it's really the way people live. And for us, Western, sometimes we like to call it a crisis. What it is, it's really an extreme setting. If it's heavy drought that bring famine, or the plight of refugees which are in movement. But I got exposed to this whole world of crisis and international development through the news. And after a while, I kind of got sick of that. I wanted to go deeper than just the headlines.
Yeah.
And I drifted into the documentary world, and until I became completely freelance. Today, I don't like to be embedded by any platform or anything. I want to have my own voice, and I want to hear real voices. I want to give the platform to real people, locals, and hear what they have to say. Yeah, that makes sense.
And I think that's like, that's super evident in your work, right? I know that your photography is very much focused on people. And when you look at those photos, you can definitely feel the weight of that person and what they're feeling in that moment. Why was it important for you, like you said, to go beyond the headline? Because a lot of news outlets, a lot of stories nowadays, storytelling is about, you know, the headline itself, like what grabs attention most, gets most clicks.
Yeah.
For you, what was that compelling moment that went, okay, I think it's more important for me to better understand the story, better understand the people, rather than just go, cool, massive hurricane, 100 deaths, that's it.
Yeah, I think what is dangerous about the headlines is the motive. Why? When you're asking, why are you going to document anything? Because this is your job, because you're getting paid, or because you care about showing the real story. And I found myself in situations where I'm sent to bring home a certain story, but I meet a completely different story. And a famous example is how I got exposed to the African continent, which I fall in love with. I was exposed to the African continent through this narrow, tiny door, very stigmatized. The poor Africa and the sad and poverty and pain and all that, very stigmatized. But it's not the Africa that I met. I met brilliant people, joyful, colorful, happy, smart, wise. So I came with pity, but I got back home with jealousy. And you see, and then I realized I want to tell the story that I see and I meet, and not the story that I'm sent to be documenting. And that what made that shift.
Sure. And this might be a bit of a tougher question, but I think it's something that you've touched on a bit as well in our discussions. The criticism around kind of like the white savior mentality, or the creation of what some people label poverty porn, right? You know, you go to poor places around the world, you take photos just to rack up the likes on Instagram and all that kind of, you know, that kind of digital gamification of culture.
Yeah.
First of all, maybe not so much you, but have you received criticism as a result of that? And also then, how do you respond to that criticism, or do you even bother?
Yeah. Well, first of all, when I started, I not only received criticism, but I also, I failed. And I did that many times. But as I grew up and as I learned more and understood more what I'm documenting and where, and the culture sensitivity that I need to bring with me, and also the weight. You know, if today I believe that the camera that I'm holding is not just a camera to take pretty pictures, but it's really a weapon and a tool to drive change and awareness. And that tool also has a responsibility, and also you have to come to the field with a toolbox of ethics, and know how to present and how not to present. Now, to come to a place that just was hit by a natural disaster and to find a poor boy that is crying on the side of the road, that would be the easiest thing. But to find a story of a family that are gonna build their home together, back from pieces, like a heroism story, a success story, a light, a small light in this dark situation. That is the real challenge, and that is now what I'm after. Because we have to balance. There is, from one side, the stigmatized, misconception, and then from the other side, there is the romanticizing of poverty, and just romanticizing it. And I think in between is what I call honest reporting.
Yeah.
If you be honest about what you see and what you experience, you don't have to play with these two far edges all the time.
Is it also about then what you're talking about in this idea of honest reporting, the intention behind it, and almost being humble enough and recognizing that whether it's you behind a camera or me kind of like using a pen and writing a story, that there has to be, you have to remove yourself as far as possible, the ego of being the creator, and go, it's not actually about how good this story will turn out, it's how useful the avenue that you're giving these people could be.
Exactly. And I think it always comes to the same question. Why are you doing what you're doing? Why are you here in the middle of this disaster reporting? And when you sorry, just my wife got in.
That's all good.
Hi Mash. When you honest about this question, the real magic will happen. Because if you forget, I just forgot what I wanted to say.
That's all good. No, that's all good. Maybe this will help bring it back. Talking, I guess, then now you've mentioned responsibility a few times. And I think with what's going on around the world, there'll be a lot of people taking to the streets, not only to protest, but also to document the protests. Where does creative responsibility fall in crisis? I know we've touched on intention, we've touched on, not putting yourself before the story, but also to what extent does the responsibility exist for creatives to, within your reach, within your control, to take part in these conversations and to shed light on them?
Yeah. I have two things to say about it, because, if you study journalism, you're always being told that you are here to observe and not get involved and all that. And I don't think like it fits our world anymore, because we are all players today. We all have a social media. We all have, each one of us has a platform that he speaks his mind. It wasn't like that in the 80s and the 90s, but today it is. And you see more and more people moving from observing to acting, and using that tool, if it's the art, a camera, writing, whatever it is, to not only observe, not only be, but also act. And you see that a lot right now with the Black Lives Matter movement, that they calling people, don't be silent, because if you're silent, you're doing the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And they put the pressure on that. And I found it interesting. We're living in a time that every person needs to have an opinion, needs to know what he believes in. And it's challenging, but it's also pushing you to be more educated about what's going on in the world, what's going on around my community, around the world. And that is important, because when you know how this world looks like, we see this world falling apart, and everybody's going crazy. And I don't want to say, I'm trying to think how to say it. When this whole COVID thing started and everybody got so panicked, and I was like, interesting. Like, I'm kind of used to this feeling of the end of the world. I'm used to it coming to my house, but I'm used to be around that feeling that nobody understands what's going on, and everybody's like, the ground is shaking. It's like an earthquake.
Yeah.
this instability, it also brings an opportunity.
Yes.
Because we're not so we care about things that we didn't think about in our normal life, because we were too stressed to go to work and to come back and to feed the kids and the dog and exercise and all that we didn't stop to think. And I think this is a very interesting period in history that that the world stopped and people actually start thinking. And it's not by chance that people are flooding in the streets, and it's not only the streets in America, and it's not only because racism. A lot of issues are rising while this COVID-19 happens, and that's interesting.
I think it's interesting, you know, like, and I liked what you said, that with the creative responsibility comes this idea of you have to be educating yourself, not just doing what the general population does, unless you truly believe in it, as you really understand what's going on as well. And I think that's such an important lesson, because you forget that, you know, in the small kind of world that we are exposed to, that outside of that, like you said, a lot of things are going on. Like, you've seen a lot of things in Africa go on. You know, you have the Uyghurs in China, the Rohingya in Burma, you know, people in the Middle East protesting, people in South America protesting about the cost of public transport, the cost of oil. So I think you're right that we're so used to being distant from the issues, and suddenly COVID-19 forces us to one, stay in place, so that suddenly now everything comes to us, and then this whole thing is boiled over. How do you, and this might be a very broad question, and this is my second last question,
All right.
how do you stay educated, and why is that so important to you?
That is a good question. It's not like I can send you to a website that I secretly log into. A lot of times I wait before I speak. You know, there's a famous African proverb that says, eat when the food is ready, speak when you have something to say.
Yeah.
And that this past week, you see all this hashtags and people talking and like people just, they rush to the keyboard to say something. And it took me a while. It took me a few days until I felt like I have something to say about this. You also, when you eat, you don't go right away to the bathroom, right? It takes some time for the food to come down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It
yes,
takes some
of
time.
course.
What am I looking at?
Yeah.
What is the conflict? Maybe I need to go and research. Maybe I want to learn about the history. You know, I found myself yesterday reading about the first slave market. Okay, just because this whole America thing started knocking on everybody's doors, and I wanted to, I don't know, I was interested to see, learn the history and what exactly happened. And you also to get to know America has a very violent and bloody history. I mean, who doesn't? But yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think first is to listen, and then to speak if you have something to say. But listening and not saying anything is not wrong. It's never wrong.
Yeah.
It's better than talking without knowing what you say.
Exactly.
Because also, I noticed that a lot of people, you have this people who are protesting right now in America. Let them use the hashtags. If you are using the hashtag from your office in Melbourne, so what are we doing? You're killing the movement.
Yeah.
All these black screens, every company is so, but I say, don't wait for Tuesdays to protest. There is a lot you can protest for. Find your cause, find your calling, and protest because you have the right to.
Love it.
And someone needs you to protest for his or her rights.
Yeah.
So, very important thing to do.
And I like that, because I like the intention of, one, don't speak unless you have something to say. I think is an important thing. Don't just start talking because you go, well, everyone's talking, so let me just jump in and contribute. Like,
Yeah.
Sometimes leaving the space open for the people that need the space to talk is an important act in itself. But also, like what you said, which is, if you find your calling and you find your cause, then find your way to go about and champion that. And I think you've done that through advocacy with your camera. Like you said at the very top of this, you said that some people will be protesting in the streets, others will be doing things from their computer and their desk in the office. For you, it's very much being in the thick of it, on the ground, using your camera as almost this silent observer to then channel the voice of the people that need to be heard. So my last question for you is, there are probably going to be a lot of people documenting the things in the coming months, young creatives who like you feel that creative responsibility. What advice do you have for them heading into situations like this, into real crisis situations? Because having known you for a few years now, the stories that we've worked on, even I sometimes still think about the images that I've helped you bring to life through words, and I haven't been there. Do you know what I mean? What advice do you have for young creatives who find themselves now, whether it's the riots in the streets of Minneapolis to the work that you've done? You know, a young creative might look at the work that you've done and go, cool, I want to go to Uganda and champion the rights of, you know, the ethnic minorities there. What advice do you have for them heading into those kind of contexts?
Yeah, interesting. Well, first of all, safety first. Safety first. Sometimes for young creative, we want to get right in the midst of the chaos, you know. But what I would suggest and advise is try to look at what's in front of you through your eyes. Don't look for the story that we already keep seeing. Every story has so many ways to tell it, has so many angles. And when I bring this question to my field, and I'm looking at Africa, for example, we have two famous stories, okay? The Africa of the wildlife, giraffes, elephants, and the Maasai tribe jumping, and then the poverty and sad and all that. But there's so much in between those, and we don't hear that. We don't hear the heroes of every day. Africa is not poor. It's the richest continent in the world. It's the continent that fuels our planes, and we put it's gold on our neck and diamonds on our fingers. It's not the story at all. And I'm looking to see original stories from Minneapolis, from that that static headlines. That's my advice. Be original. Look at things from your perspective, and not what everybody expect. More violence, more screaming, the same slogans. Okay, we've seen that. We understand. We digest. Now, bring me a story of hope. Bring me a story of courage, heroism. Bring me something new. I'm sure there's so many voices in these protests, and I like to see different angles so I can create the story, a more honest story in my head. I need few angles.
Love it. And most importantly, safety first all the time. But thank you, Leo. I really appreciate it. I know you said you didn't do any calls with anyone except me, so I feel incredibly honored.
Not only you, but at 1 a.m. in the morning.
At 1 a.m. in the morning for you. No, thank you so much. I think people will get a lot out of what you said, and for someone that has done it, has been in the field in these kind of situations, I think your experience is invaluable to other young creatives. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, Ryan.